light of your love is shining in the midst of the darkness shining. Jesus, light of the world, shine upon us. Set us free by the truth you now bring us. Shine on.
So many questions we have about this life, so many things that we want answered. And God's letting us know that we don't know those answers while we're here. But when we get there, then we will understand that we'll know more then and only then, because that's what He's got in store for us there, and that should be good enough for us while we're here because of all the good things He's given to us. If you got your Bibles, I want you to go ahead and mark the book of Nehemiah. We're going to be going there in a few minutes. We are looking at what it means to have an abundant life, what it means for us to experience that good gift that God has given to us. We look at these passages here in Jeremiah chapter 9, Jeremiah 29, verse 13. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans of welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will hear you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. Then we looked at John chapter 9 and talked about the blind man. And as we looked at the blind man, Jesus continues His little lesson to those Pharisees and to those that were there with the blind man. And He gets into John chapter 10 and He tells them that I'm coming, that the thief only comes in to steal and to kill and destroy, but I'm coming that you may have life and that you may have that life more abundantly. That life running over, a happy life, a good life. Not a health and wealth gospel. Doesn't mean everything's going to work out great for you, but it does mean that God says, with me, you got a better way of life, and that's our theme for the month. You have a better way of life if you live for me. If you just do as I ask, if you follow me, if you look at my guidelines. I don't even want to call them rules. I think rules sound derogatory. You know, when we look at how you're following the rules, even though they're there for us, even though they're there for our protection and to help us, we view that word rules as kind of like a bad thing. But God says, if you follow my advice, a little stronger than advice, if you follow my plan, that's it. If you follow my plan, you're going to have a better way of life. Your life, you may not have everything work out for you perfectly, but you will definitely look back and say, because I knew Jesus, because I did what God wanted me to do, my life was better. That's what we're trying to be. That's all we're trying to be. I'm not suggesting that any of us are bad people. I'm not suggesting that any of us are the scum of the earth, but I do know that all of us can do better. There's not a one single person in here that could not look at their life and say, you know what I'm doing? I've done everything I can do and that's it. That's all I can. No, I think if we all took that long look inside, we'd see, I could do better. And we looked, as we went on this quest to kind of discover that, we looked at a few things. We looked at what it meant to have that abundant living. And we looked, for us to do that, we got to know some truths. We got to do some self-evaluation. We got to look at some things, some guidelines that God has put forth in the Scriptures that's going to help us have this life. And one of those things was that long look you got to take within yourself. You got to look at who you are, what you are, where you are, and what you want. If you don't know those things, you got a big problem, because you can't go any further on this quest. You got to know who you are, whose you are, or what you are, where you are in relation to that plan of welfare that God has for you, and what do you want out of life. And once you uncover that, then we moved on into the next step, where you got to take on the responsibility of understanding those things. You got to take on that responsibility and own it. It has to be your responsibility. You cannot depend on anybody else to do it for you. This must be you. And because a lot of us like to pass that responsibility on, a lot of us like to play the victim. Oh, I would do it if this was better in my life, and if I had a better job, or if I had more time on my hands. And we pass the blame, just like Adam did there in Genesis chapter 3. The woman that you gave me, Lord, she gave to me. If it wasn't for her, wasn't for you giving her to me, then my life would be all right. I'd still be living in this Garden of Eden. And there we see that that's not the way to work either. That it never works. You'll never have that abundant living if you continue to play the victim. So we can't play the victim. So what do? Well, the next step, and that's where we are today, is that we've got to make a plan, because having that plan is critical to having this abundant life. You got to set forth this plan. You got to look at the plan. You got to do what you're going to set out to do. If you're going to know where you are and what you want, you got to decide, how am I going to get from point A to point B? Point Z? How am I going to get there? Because there's going to be little stops all along the way. And we live in a fast-paced world. We live in a world where we want things immediately, where we want things quickly. And God's plan just isn't like that. You can receive salvation quickly when you become a child of God. But after that, to maintain that life, to maintain that salvation, it's work. It's a long process that we have to work at. And to have that abundant living, you need to have a plan, guys. And each plan for each individual person is different. I can't give you these steps. I can't tell you, these things are what's going to get you. I can tell you certain aspects. And we're going to look at the Scriptures. We're going to look at Nehemiah and look at these certain aspects that can get us our abundant living. But each of you are in different places. You know, it's very difficult for ministers sometimes, because there are times when we look at our own life and we look and we want to shoot like a rifle. We want to look and we want to have that perfect aim and hit where we need it the most. And we think that maybe if that's where we need it, then everybody else needs it that way. But that's not the case. Because all of us here are at different levels in our faith. There are some people here that are more mature in their faith than I ever am right now. And I strive to get to that point where some of you are. And some of you are doing the same, looking at my life, and you're saying, I'd like to have a faith like Matt's. Not that mine's the best. But we're all in different places on this journey from A to Z, on this quest. We're all in different places. So we all have different goals. What do you want? Some of you want different things. So we got to develop a plan to get there. Well, I'm going to give you some things about a plan. I'm going to look at a couple quotes on planning and what it means to have a good plan before we move on, and then look at what the Scriptures say about it, because I believe having this plan is critical. Even men of the world have pointed this out. You can look at Confucius. Confucius says, a man who does not plan long ahead will find trouble at his door. That if you don't plan ahead, there's going to be trouble. There's going to be something happen, and it's going to be laying right in front of your door. And then what are you going to be able to do? Richard Cushing says, always plan ahead. It wasn't raining when Noah built the ark. You think about what it would have been like if Noah had said, you know, I know God wants us to build this ark, boys, and I know Shem, Ham, Japheth, God wants us to do it, but you know, I know you got lives, I know you got families you're starting, you want to have children, you got your wives, and I know all these things you got going on, but you know, we really need to get started on this ark sometime. And then it started raining. And then it was too late. The planning went into that. We got to, obvious you can see that. Another one that we can look at here is Napoleon Hill. Write it down. Reduce your plan to writing. Now, I struggle with this with my children. It's because, to me, I study a different way than maybe they do. Is I like to, if I have a class and if I have an exam, I like to write my notes out over and over and over again. I'll write it over and over and over again because I believe, and I think there's science behind it. If you know the science behind it, please share it with me so I can use it with my children. That when you write it down, there's some connection from your finger and the pen to your brain that says, this is real. This is real. Otherwise, in your mind, it's just an arbitrary thing. And the more you write it, the more you learn it. The more it becomes part of you because you're making it part of you. Well, this man, he says this about making these plans for the future. He says that if you write it down, you're definitely giving concrete form to the intangible desire. See, here's the thing. You're sitting here, and I want you to do this with me. I don't know what's going on in your life. I don't know what you want. I don't know what you're looking for. But I know all of you got something to write with probably, and you got those cards in the back of the pew. You got a little note that you got, a piece of paper, maybe the bulletin. I want you to just write something down for just a second. I want you to look and pause and say, what do I want? What is my goal? What do I feel like I need? And once you do that, I want you to write it down, because otherwise, that is an intangible thing. It's just something out there in the air, out in the middle of nowhere, and you can't get to it. You're just reaching for it in different places because it's just out there. But if you can write it down, you give some concrete evidence to what you're trying to do. So you do that. Just so as we go through the lesson, you just write down, just jot something down about what you want, about what you can have in your plan to get there. And then at the end of the lesson, we'll talk about steps to get there. Write it down. Other quotes that we could say, I didn't put them all on the screen that I've got. Benjamin Franklin, of course, I believe John Wooden said something along the lines of this: by failing to prepare, you're preparing to fail. And we've got to look at planning. But Matt, that's a little different, because I thought the Bible tells us not to put those thoughts like that. I thought the Bible tells us different things about not looking to the future in that way. Well, that's true. Look at this. In James chapter 4. Come now, you who say today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make profit. Yet you don't know what your tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. God's telling us here, Matt, that we're not supposed to plan for tomorrow because we don't know if there's tomorrow. Well, that's partly true. We don't know if there's a tomorrow. But God's not telling us don't set forth to plan. God's saying don't put so much confidence in tomorrow. Take advantage of what you have now. Don't put your confidence in thinking you're going to have that, because it's not a given. He's not saying don't look to the future. He's not saying don't plan. Well, go back to Noah. What if Noah said, well, God says our lives are a vapor. It only appears for a little while, so we don't need to focus on tomorrow. So we don't need to build that ark right now, because we don't know if we're going to be here tomorrow. And if we start today, there's no way we can build an ark in a day. You see how ridiculous that sounds? Look at this other verse that God tells us through Proverbs. Do not boast about tomorrow, for you do not know what the day may bring. There you go. Don't put too much confidence in it. God's not saying you shouldn't plan. God's just saying don't put too much confidence in having the future, because it's not there. That's why you do it now. He does say this: where there is no guidance, people falls. But in an abundance of counselors, there's safety. Where there's no guidance, where there's no plan, the people fall. But where there's an abundance of counselors, those that are there to help you, to plan. Proverbs 21:5. The plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance, but everyone who hastily comes only to poverty. The plans of the diligent surely lead to abundance. So God wants us to plan, church. God wants us to have a plan. He wants us to consider these things. One more passage. I didn't put this on the screen, but go in and look to Luke chapter 14. And I think you know where I'm going with this. And in Luke chapter 14, and listen to what we read here in verse 28 of Luke 14. For which of you intending to build a tower does not sit down first and count the cost, whether he has enough to finish it? Lest after he's laid the foundation, he's not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, this man began to build, but was not able to finish. See, God lets us know. We need to make sure we count the cost with things. We need to make sure we do the proper planning. We need to make sure we look through the proper channels and find out how we can do this. Well, let's do that. Let's look at Nehemiah. I had him read the whole chapter 1 of Nehemiah, because I know at least all of us now have one chapter of reading in for the day that we can look at. But when we look at that story of Nehemiah, there's definitely a plan there, church. There's definitely a plan that Nehemiah has to lay out. There's some time that passes between chapter 1 and chapter 2. It's not an immediate thing where he goes to the king. Nehemiah's been working toward things, and we know what he's doing. Nehemiah's wanting to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. He's wanting to rebuild Jerusalem. But when he finds out how the city is, about the exiles who escaped and went back home to Jerusalem, he's anxious and he wants to know what's going on back home where he was. And they tell him that the city lies in ruins. The walls are down. And this affects Nehemiah. It affects him greatly. That he's emotionally attached to this. So Nehemiah begins this plan that he's going to get back. And he's going to go and he's going to build these walls back. 52 days. He's going to build these walls back. But there's a problem because this place is 900 miles away. You ever traveled 900 miles? You ever driven 900 miles? Takes a while to drive it. Anybody here walked 900 miles? You ever done that? We got this little app with this Fitbit that we got here. And my battery's low today. And I can tell you today, just today, I've been 1,700 steps. 1,700 steps. It takes me about 2,000 steps to get about a mile in. And when you look at how many steps it's going to take, periodically I'll get a little email from this thing that says, oh, you have traveled from here to Los Angeles. You've walked that far. Well, you know how long it took for me to do that? About 2 years. When you look in 900 miles about how long you're going to have to walk, there had to be a plan for him to do that. How much to carry, who to carry with him, what to carry, where am I going to get food, how are we going to do this? He has a plan. And he's going to present this to the king, but let's look for just a second at some of these things. What he's going to need. First thing that we're going to see is Nehemiah, if he's going to have this plan, he's got to have a passion. When we look at the story of Nehemiah and we read what happens here, when he heard these words, verse 4, Nehemiah 1, I sat down and I wept for many days. I was fasting and praying before the God of heaven. There was a passion there. There was some sort of emotional attachment. Now, I Googled this, and I have to be honest with you, I could not find any positive information behind this. But I was looking for how emotional attachment helps us in achieving our goal. Because everything I found on emotional attachment seemed to be negative. Being emotionally attached to a car, being emotionally attached to an item that we've got, and we have this emotional attachment to something, some physical thing. I'm not talking about something physical. I'm talking about something that's beyond the physical. I'm talking about something that is metaphysical, that God has in store for us. Right? I'm talking about something, being passionate about a concept. What you wrote down, if you wrote down something, and you should have wrote down something, because if you didn't write down something, you don't want to improve, and what you're saying is, I got all I need. I don't need to be better. I'm fine. If you wrote down something that you wanted to have in your life. Now, if you really want that, you're going to be passionate about it. Now, let's just say, for instance, generally, we just want to be better Christians. We just want to be more devout in our faith. That's pretty simple, but it's hard to do. But it's a simple statement that we want to be better. How can you be better in your faith to God if you don't have some sort of emotional attachment to it? Greater love hath no man than this, that a man give his life for his friend. That's emotional attachment. That's a love that Christ has for us so much that He was willing to give His life for us. That's the greatest love you can have. And that's what He has for us. Greater love hath no man than this, that you give your life for Christ, that you give your life back to Him. You've got to have some sort of emotional. He felt this. When there was something wrong, it bothered Him. It troubled Him. He cried for many days. Now, like I said, there's time between chapter 1 and chapter 2. I don't know, but the king looks at him and notices days after, man, you're sad. He just looks at him and you're sad. What's going on, Nehemiah? What's troubling you? Let me know what's troubling you. You don't normally look this way. Something's bothering you. I hope and pray that if you are not reaching your goal, that there's something about you that is disgusted about it. I hope if you're not doing what you know you should or what you want to do, that you're bothered by it. I hope sometimes it brings you to tears. If somebody comes to you and says, how's your city of God doing? Well, this city of God right here, you know what? This city of my life that I've got from God, where He dwells, it's in ruins. It's not what it should be. My walls of protection that I've put up from God, they've dwindled away, they've fallen down, and I'm letting the devil just take whatever he wants. You should be upset about that. You should be troubled about that. And I hope you've shed tears over that sometime. I hope it's not like one of those things, I know I need to do that. I know I need to get back to that. I know I need to make sure I get that repaired. I hope it's one of those things that emotionally attaches you. Because that's what Nehemiah had. You got to have a passion if you want something. You got to have something behind it. That reminds me of Caleb. When you look at Joshua, when Joshua gets over into the promised land. Caleb is waiting so long to get there. And he's 85 years old. And he says, I'm 85 years old, and I'm just as froggy out as I was back when I was 40. I'm ready to go. If you need me to fight in a battle, I'll go fight. If you need me to go, I can go do it. You see that mountain right there? I can take that mountain down. Because I know what I've been promised, and I'm ready to go get it. That's passion. That's saying, I want it so much, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get it. You got to have that, church. In your plan, you got to have this passion. If you don't have it, you're not going to accomplish anything. Steve Jobs says people with a passion can change the world. Well, if people with a passion can change the world, a person with passion can change their life. And that's what we're looking to do. Not only having that passion, you got to have this prayer that's affiliated with it. You got to have a prayer. Notice what he does in verse 6. He prays. What's he pray for? What's he looking for? What's he praying for? Look at what he read. Look at this prayer for just a second and what he says. Nehemiah 1:6. Please let your ear be attentive, let your eyes be upon me, that you may hear my prayer, the prayer of your servant that I pray before you now, night and day, for the children of Israel, your servants, and confess the sins of the children of Israel, which we have sinned against you. Both my father's house and I have sinned against you. I appreciated that last week. We had the responses last week, and Jimmy came up here and led prayer, and that was what he said in his prayer. And that was a response. I didn't ask him, but I know it was. When Jimmy gets up here and verbally says, you know what, God, I ask you to forgive me of my sin. When I asking you, God, to help me with my life. Forgive me of my shortcomings so that I can be a better person. That's a response. That's a prayer to God. That's what Nehemiah is praying to. He looks at his city. He says, this is what I want. I want to get from A to Z. I got a long way to go. But he starts off saying, God, I need a blank slate. I need you to I need to understand that I'm forgiven. I want you to know that I'm sorry for what I've done. Some of you need that prayer today. If you're going to get from here to there, and you got to have this plan, some of you got some obstacles that you've put in your own way. Some things that you've set yourself up for failure that you got to have taken out. If you don't take them out, you're never going to have any progress. Maybe that's why you haven't had the progress you've wanted before. Is because these things are in your life. You got to have that prayer. Proverbs 23 verse 13 says, he who covers his sin will not prosper. But whoever confesses it and forsakes them will have mercy. You'll never prosper if you just try to hide your sins. Lay them out there. Ask God to take them away. You got to have that prayer. Then he says you need to have a petition. I'm not talking about a list of names. But you got to petition the help of others. That's what Nehemiah does. He's going to go before the king. He's going to ask the king, can I have your help? Not only do I need your help, I need you to send letters. I need all this. I need money from you, king. I need letters from you so that I can go do this. I can't do this by myself. You can't do this by yourself. As iron sharpens iron, so shall a man sharpen the countenance of his own friend. That's what Proverbs 27:17 says. You make each other better. You provoke one another to love and to good works by not forsaking the assembling of yourselves together. By coming to church, you push each other. You motivate each other. You are petitioning others for help. Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 9 through 12. Two are stronger than one. You got to have that. And that's what Nehemiah can't go build this wall by himself. And when you read the book of Nehemiah, when you continue on and what happens, it says as they're building, this person was beside this person, and this person was beside this person, and they were beside them, and they were all working together. If you're going to have, you got to petition that help from others. You got to look to others to try to find that help. But then we also got to have participation of ourselves. When we look at verse 6 and 7 there, he lays it out and he has some fasting. Not only does he ask God to help him, but he fasts. He puts forth an effort and says, God, I want this so bad, this is what I'm willing to do. And then when he goes to the king asks him, if you look at chapter 2, verse 5, the king says, what do you want me to do about it? What do you want me to do about this, Nehemiah? You notice what Nehemiah, I underlined it in red this morning in my Bible in chapter 2, verse 5. And I said to the king, if it pleases the king, and you find your servant has found favor in your sight, I ask that you send me. See that? You send me to Judah that I may rebuild it. You got to have some sort of participation. You got to get involved with it yourself. Now, here's what we do. Sometimes we don't want to. I've prayed to God that He'd help me. God, I've prayed over and over again for this thing to happen. I've prayed 3 times today and 3 times yesterday, and God's not doing it. Well, let me ask you this. How would it be if I wanted to dig a hole and I brought a shovel? And I took that shovel and I propped it up right here, and I'm digging a hole right here, and I propped it up right here, and I said, Lord, please dig this hole. I need this hole, God. I need this hole in my life fixed. I need this hole. God, please give me a hole. And then lean up against that shovel. Does that sound ridiculous? God can do anything. Yes, God can do things. God's not going to dig you a hole if you ain't willing to use the shovel, church. He's not going to dig you a hole if you've got a shovel in your hand and you're not willing to put forth the effort to get it. He's not going to say, make me a great Christian, Lord, while I sit at home and not study my Bible. Make me a devout person, Lord, while I don't give of my means. Make me better if you're not willing to put forth the effort. Nehemiah put his hands to the plow and he went. And then you got to see what else you got to have is you got to have the patience. As I told you, it's not easy to get from here to here. But he got there. 52 days he got there. When the king says, tell me what you need. How much time you need? You can look. We don't have time because I'm finishing up. But we can look in chapters 5, verse 14. And then look in chapter 13, verse 6. Do you know, in essence, what Nehemiah was asking all for? Nehemiah went to the king and said, I'm your cupbearer, but I need some time off. I want to go back and I want to rebuild these walls. How much time you need, son? How much time do you need to go back and do this? And Nehemiah says this. I need 12 years. I need 12 years to take off work. Now, Craig, what would Lowe's say if you went to them this morning and said, you know, I got some things I need to do at home that I really need to take care of. Can I have some time off? Sure. How much time you need, Craig? I need 12 years. It's not going to be easy. You look at the end of chapter 13, you know what he did 12 years later? He went back to the king. Did exactly as he said he was going to do. Guys, I think Nehemiah wrote this stuff down. I think he did. I think he thought, I got to go 900 miles. How much can I travel per day? What do I need? What am I going to have to rebuild this city? I haven't even seen it yet, but I know I'm going to need this. I'm going to need the help of others. He was passionate about it. He participated in it. He needed everybody else's help. He couldn't do it himself. He was patient with it. He persevered so that he could get it done. Those are little steps that we can do if we want to reach our goal, church. Now look there. Look on what you wrote. And what does it say? How are you going to get there? Well, let me tell you what you need. You better have a passion, of wanting it. Better not just be something you arbitrarily wrote down. Thought this would be nice. No, you better wrote something down that you really want. And you better have some sort of emotional attachment to it that if you don't get it, you're going to be deeply disappointed. You're going to be hurt. If you want that abundant living. Not only you got to have some prayer behind that, you got to put forth an effort to ask God to help you with it, but above all, you ask God to make sure you're in good standing with Him so you can start off fresh and do it. Then you look out and get all the help you can from other people. Then you look and you make sure you're doing something about it yourself. Because you're the only one responsible for it. And then have patience to see it through to the end. That's the plan. So you look at your life. You look at what you've got on your piece of paper and how you're going to be better. How are you going to get it? This is what I'd recommend. I'm not a perfect person. But I know that you've got things written down just like I got things written down. Things we want to be better at. And you've worked and you've worked and you worked and you hadn't got there yet. Well, have you asked God about it? Have you asked Him to wipe your slate clean and give you what you want? Give you those things that you need? Have you asked for that forgiveness? Because if you haven't, you've put a roadblock in front of yourself. You're never going to achieve it. So this morning, you ask yourself that question. He's going to put the invitation song back up. And you look at your life, and if there's things amiss that you need to fix, let's remove those roadblocks. Let's say, Lord, please, I want to be better. I want to achieve this abundant living, but I got to make sure I get this out of the way first. And I need the help of my family, my church family. And I need to make sure I put forth an effort myself. And you can achieve it. 52 days he built the city wall. 52 days with God's help. He can certainly repair your life if He can do that. Whatever you need, Jesus is here. Forgiveness is here. You just got to access it. As we stand and sing the invitation song.
Shine, Jesus, shine, fill this land with the Father's glory. Blaze, Spirit, blaze, set our hearts on fire. Flow, river, flow, flood the nations with grace.